In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the security that will be implemented in this year's Commonwealth Games from a security expert's perspective. Don't forget to give this video a like and to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all the latest security guarding news. Now let's get started. This year's Commonwealth Games are due to be held in Birmingham in the UK, across several different venues that are in the area. It's taken more than 100 people over 5 years to plan the security strategy that's going to be put in place for the Commonwealth Games. So just from this you can see how much effort is being put into it. It's not just something that they're coming up with over a short period of time. It's taken a lot of planning and a lot of thought to sort of figure out how much of this is going to be the responsibility of private security, how much is going to be the responsibility of law enforcement. They're just trying to figure out those sort of logistics. While figures aren't available yet for the overall cost of the security services that are going to be at this year's Commonwealth Games, we can look at previous years to see the sort of costs we would be looking at. For example, in 2014 in the Commonwealth Games that were in Glasgow, it ended up costing over 90 billion just for the security alone at that Commonwealth Games. Events like this are prime targets for acts of terror and things along those lines. That's the thing that jumps out to me immediately when it's any large event. It doesn't really matter what it is, whether it's a large sporting event like the Olympics or the World Cup, or if it's a festival like Glastonbury or Download or something like that. Large events where there's lots of members of the public and that are broadcast to a wide range of people, whether that's nationally or internationally, there are always going to be concerns over terrorist attacks. So different events are going to be held at different venues across Birmingham. It's not just going to be a one-off in one event over the period of the week that it's taking place. It's going to be different venues at all different places across the city itself. This can cause a logistical problem for security services, as it's going to mean that a risk assessment will need to be done for each venue, and obviously different things are going to be different at different venues. One venue might have a high risk that another doesn't, and vice versa. Security teams are going to need to be made aware of this, especially if they aren't working the same venue for the entire week. They'll need to be made aware of any changes or extra precautions that are in place from one venue to the next and one event to the next. This also means that communication between different security teams and law enforcement teams is going to have to be as efficient as it possibly can be, so that all teams involved are aware of different threats that may be taking place in the area. For example, one threat on one side of the city might not necessarily affect another side of the city or another venue, but it's important that all venues and all teams are aware of these threats. An example of this would be if a suspicious individual had been denied entry into one of the venues. They could easily go and try this at another venue if the different teams aren't communicating and they don't know what they should be looking out for, or if they should be looking out for certain individuals. Security teams will be trained on what threats they need to look out for, as well as how to properly deal with them as well. So there's going to be over 3,000 police deployed in the area that are going to span different departments within the police force itself. So you can see there's going to be a great law enforcement presence at the Commonwealth Games. It's not just going to be private security. This is going to provide a big visual deterrent for anyone who poses a security risk, but it's also going to mean that there's properly trained individuals who know how to respond to these threats. The different departments which are going to be involved will include firearms police, drones, traffic police and counter-terrorism unit. This is the biggest operation in West Midlands policing history. Drones are a major focus in terms of being a threat at this event. It's becoming more and more of a common hobby, with up to 130,000 drones in the UK alone. While it's difficult to establish what specific risk each individual drone may carry, as they have a wide range of uses, which range from filming capabilities all the way up to military capabilities. To counter this, police are establishing a no-fly zone in the entire area. This includes specific areas of the West Midlands as well as the entirety of Birmingham itself. This zero-tolerance policy is going to remove any risk posed by any drones, without having to establish what kind of risk each drone poses beforehand. We are seeing more and more drone restrictions being placed at events like this. It's especially common in America for their sporting events. Over the past few years, they've seen more and more issues with drones flying over sports fields and things like that. So stricter measures are being introduced at sporting events across the world to tackle the risk of drones. More than 55 dogs are going to be deployed during the duration of the games, which range from bomb detecting dogs to drug detecting dogs. The main threat here once again comes from an act of terror. An event like this is always going to be a high priority target for acts of terrorism. These dogs aren't only going to be sweeping the venues where the event takes place, they will also help prevent any explosive devices or chemicals being brought into the venues. This is going to greatly reduce the risk of any harm coming to anybody at the venue, as well as the venue itself. This is going to be on top of anything that is put in place by the private security, such as searches, certain items being banned from the venue itself. This can include anything from weapons, drugs, or even cameras at some events. Military personnel are also going to be on hand to assist the security at these events should it be needed. This is in response to what happened at the London Olympics in 2012, where the contracted security company G4S weren't able to provide enough security staff for the events. This has been done to ensure that nobody is caught off guard with the security needs. Even a small period where there is a fault in the security could provide the opportune moment for something like a terrorist attack to be carried out. So it's important to establish this beforehand so there is countermeasures in place should security measures not be adequate enough. Say, for example, if a lot of the security staff came into contact with COVID-19 and they were unable to work, they could then be replaced with military personnel. Hopefully this is something that doesn't happen, but it's just an example of a case where this might need to be implemented. Certain areas around the different venues are going to be inaccessible and blocked off with police checkpoints as well. This is going to reduce the risk of certain terrorist incidents occurring where vehicles are used. We're seeing more and more of these occur over the years where large groups of people are the specific targets for people in cars in order to cause as much damage as possible. It's easier to be carried out than an elaborate plot using explosives and weapons and those sorts of things. While this can cause an inconvenience for people living in those areas and travelling through those areas, it is an important aspect of the security strategy overall. Birmingham City Council and Transport for West Midlands has issued maps of the areas that are going to be affected by these road closures, which we've placed links for in the description. So while all of this could seem excessive, a lot of lessons have been learnt from previous events, as well as from the previous Commonwealth Games itself. Chief Constable Sir David Thompson attended the event in Australia to get an idea of the sorts of things which work, the sort of things which don't work, and what they could do to make things as safe as possible. It's important to remember that these measures are in place to keep everybody as safe as possible. This includes athletes, event staff, news reporters, and the audience themselves. Large events which attract a global audience are always going to need to be taken into consideration when it comes to safety and security. Events like this are prime targets for acts of terrorism, targeting members of the public as well as the event. So there we have a breakdown of the security at this year's Commonwealth Games from a security expert's perspective. If you have any thoughts, let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, give us a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all the latest security guarding news. Thanks for watching and we'll see you again in the next one.